I'll just leave this here.
It's odd. I hadn't heard about Hollow Knight until about 2 months ago, but I can now say with confidence that I find this to be one of my favorite games of all time. Hollow Knight was produced by Team Cherry, a small indie game developer comprised of only 2 people at the time of this game's creation. Somehow, these 2 creative geniuses, being Ari Gibson and William Pellin, have created a masterpiece at which pleased the heart of many and created an ever-expanding community. In light of the announcement of the anticipated sequel, I thought I would give my opinion on what makes this game so good, and maybe even find a few things that I had issue with. I am Fake Australian, and welcome to Let's Talk About. Funny enough, I actually discovered Hollow Knight through the Xbox Game Pass library. The pass had just recently gone on sale, and they only wanted $1 for 3 months. I figured this was a good deal and decided that I would purchase the pass. As though it were fate, Hollow Knight was added to the Game Pass only a few days prior. I had no clue what the game was or what it was about, but I mentioned it to a friend who said that I had to play it. Apparently, he had been playing it for quite some time now and thought I would enjoy it just as much as he had. I downloaded the game, and little did I know, I would pump almost 40 hours into it in a matter of a few days. I was instantly hooked. Everything from its difficulty to precise gameplay mechanics and vague lore had me constantly searching for more. I made it a point to play my first playthrough completely blind, so I made my friend shut his mouth about the story and never once opened a walkthrough or guide just to have the best experience that I could. After 35 hours of play, I would complete the game with a 92% completion rate, achieving the basic ending. The best part, I wasn't even done yet. After some digging on the lore and conception of the game, I discovered that not only did the game have 5 endings in total, but also 3 additional free DLC. There was so much more for me to explore, and even at the creation of this video, I have yet to complete all of its content all the way through. Hollow Knight falls under the game genre of Metroidvania games. Similar to the Metroid and Castlevania series, it's a large interconnected platformer that has you revisit areas when you've gained specific items or abilities. Growing up, I never played any Metroidvania games, making Hollow Knight my first, and let me just say that I am glad my first game in the genre was as good as it was. I never felt like I was lost, even when I actually was. The constant map checking, the circles I would unintentionally walk in, and even getting stuck in areas for hours at a time, I almost always felt like I was accomplishing something. I was constantly finding secrets, discovering new pathways, and creating an experience of my own, so never was I bored while playing the game. In my earlier years of gaming, I was always a sucker for a challenge. I enjoyed painstakingly difficult games and thrived off of the adrenaline. Games such as Dark Souls and Ninja Gaiden were among some of my most played games growing up. Even survival horror and wave-based games such as Call of Duty Zombies were games that I put plenty of hours into. Now, I know the Hollow Knight community hates to be compared to the Soulsborne series, but that has to be the best similarity I can draw from. Both of them share similarities such as losing all of your currency upon death, but both games are also difficult in their own regard. Hollow Knight requires you to use precise movements such as a double jump, a dash, and a ground pound to traverse its 2D-based vast world map. Dark Souls uses movements such as rolls and abilities such as parries to get through its more 3D-based levels. In all honesty, I had more difficulty with my first playthrough of Hollow Knight than I did with any of my Dark Souls games. Because of this, Hollow Knight quickly found a place in my heart as a favorited game. Throughout the video so far, I've given a general idea on what I enjoy about the game, but now I want to sit down and give a definite list of things that I loved about Hollow Knight. The first and probably most obvious thing would have to be the art style. The simplistic style that Hollow Knight takes is admirable in its own way. It shows that a beautiful game does not require the best engine or the highest resolution. The moving backgrounds add a level of depth into an otherwise 2D game. Each background moves at a different speed and has the same animation method as early Disney animations did. The thick black outlines also give pop to the characters, allowing them to stand out against the gray and blue color palette that the game mainly sticks to. I also love how they occasionally change from the darker colors to more vibrant ones, such as the bright orange of the Infection, the yellow of the Hive, and the pink of Crystal Peak. Even the warm red of the Grim Trope DLC is a good change of pace. To be honest, I've never been one to pay too much attention to art in video games, but Hollow Knight quickly changed my outlook on the gaming industry. Secondly, the soundtrack is phenomenal. I've always been a music buff. I grew up in a household full of music while also being exposed to activities revolving around it in school. Throughout this entire video, the soundtrack has actually been playing in the background. Weeks after beating the game for the first time, I found myself returning to the soundtrack and reliving my moments against certain bosses or certain parts of the game. Not only does the soundtrack have each individual boss fight's music, but it also has each area's background music. I never enjoyed listening to game soundtracks prior to Hollow Knight, but its classical style creates a sense of calmness when I listen, even with the more intense songs. Hollow Knight has plenty of good things that I would love to talk about, but in order to keep this video from being an hour long, I'll have to end the positives with one last thing: the boss fights. Holy crap! Let me just say that Hollow Knight's bosses are crazy fun to play against and crazy rewarding to beat. With how the game's health system works, you can only take so many surefire hits before you die. Because of this, you have to constantly heal and watch your health in the midst of battle. With how quickly most boss fights move in this game, you get almost no chance to do this. Each boss has their own unique moveset that requires you to learn. With every attempt, I always felt like I was getting somewhere. I would learn new timings, figure out moves, or learn how and when to attack. Each boss's music always fit the pacing of the battle very well and made it that much more intense. I can say, without a doubt, that some of my favorite game bosses come from this game. I can already say that my dislike list is going to be a lot shorter than what I actually enjoyed about the game. If I'm being completely honest with myself, most of my gripes are because of my lack of skill, limited knowledge of Metroidvania games, or user error. My first and probably most frustrating point would have to be the parkour and movement. I did talk about how I thought the movement was well put together and unique, but there were definitely moments when I felt jumps and such were just a little too precise. The parkour sections were extremely difficult for me, and I always found myself stumbling and missing jumps I shouldn't have missed. This wasn't because of faulty design or problems with the game, but rather that I had trouble learning these mechanics. Funny enough, I still have trouble with them even after so many hours into the game. I also found myself screwing up attacks and such because of my controller. I use an Xbox Elite controller, so the sticks jump back to their original position with a little more forcefulness than most controllers do. So I often found my character being turned around after an overcorrection. This messed up my spells and attacks more than I'd like to admit. My second and last issue with the game would have to be some of the items. In many games like this, almost every item available has some kind of important use, but in some instances, this wasn't the case for Hollow Knight. For example, the rancid eggs. Sure, they could be brought to Confessor GG to recover your shade after death, but this usually wasn't a needed feature. I found myself unintentionally stockpiling these, only to realize I would almost never need them. Also, while playing Steel Soul mode, they are absolutely useless. Steel Soul is the game's hard difficulty, as if the game wasn't hard enough, and it only allows you to have one life. Because of this, recovering your shade is not needed at all. It is also completely possible to miss GG and get no use out of the rancid eggs altogether. I also found that there were entire charms that were almost useless. Charms like Lifeblood Heart and Lifeblood Core gave you extra health, but it was health that could only be healed when at a bench. Once you started to collect masked fragments and gain enough health to get through the game, they weren't all that useful. I also never used Nailmaster's Glory or Dream Wielder, as both of those enhanced abilities I rarely ever found myself using in-game. So, in all honesty, most of my issues were mainly just nitpicks and not actual problems with the game. Having played this game 2 years after its release, I can say that this is a game that I will suggest to each and every one of my friends. This game is so well put together and articulated perfectly that almost every aspect of this game created a sense of importance. I can say, without a doubt, that I will continue to play this game long after I've 112%ed it. To anyone watching, I thank you for your time and support, and hope you find yourself playing this game in the future. This has been Fake Australian with Let's Talk About.